I'm here with Dr. Shirley Weber, our Secretary of State here in California. It's really good to see you. You know, we were chit-chatting before about the grandbabies and all the good stuff that's going on in the
Good
world.
things in life.
And there is a lot of good stuff going on in the world.
No question, no question. And it's good to be with you. Trust
Yeah.
It always is, yeah.
We're here in the Moscone Center here in San Francisco, which obviously has its own a lot of history in many ways. One of the great historic moments at the Moscone Center was 1984 and the words of Reverend Jesse Jackson, who obviously left us in the last days. And I understand that you knew him, and I'm curious as to what your reflections are on his legacy at this moment.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough when I was a senior at UCLA in the 60s, late 60s, to actually be a part of the Operation Breadbasket, a class I had that dealt with outreach and community development and community organizing. And one of the things we did was we worked with the Operation Breadbasket, and we went into communities. And as a result of that, Jesse Jackson would come to LA maybe every once a month to meet with us, and so did Bill Cosby. And they would come to motivate us to get out there and walk the streets, to change the narrative in terms of what was happening in the Southeast Los Angeles area. We had folks who were selling food that wasn't fresh in communities as was used to be, and they would have it fresh in Westwood and then bring it down to Southeast Los Angeles to sell it at the same price. So we as students would meet there on Saturday mornings. Every Saturday mornings we'd be greeted with folks who were singing gospel songs and everything else to get us motivated, and then we'd walk the streets in South Central LA around the grocery stores to motivate them. And so we got a chance to work every month with Jesse Jackson in Operation Breadbasket. He was located in Chicago. And then when I became a professor at San Diego State, Jackson would come often to meet with a lot of ministers, and because I was on the school board, he would invite us all to be there and to interact with him and have conversations. And of course, when he ran for president, he came to San Diego, and we were with him on the stage a couple of times to talk about what needed to happen and the things that were there. So people were very motivated by him. Anytime he came, there was great crowds of folks coming in the community because there weren't that many national leaders coming in. King had passed away. Others were not as motivating as Jesse was, and Jesse would always come, always have something to say, always motivating us to keep moving forward and keep working on it. And right before I came on this podcast, I thought about him. And I thought about him always having something music to say, you know, and us singing the various songs to keep us motivated. And we never started a meeting without a gospel song.
Oh, wow. Okay. Do you remember any of the songs that you would
You
start
know, we
with?
would always sing, I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom.
Okay.
And that was always a motivator. And we'd have some of the main famous singers come in, and they would sing the national anthem, lift every voice and sing. And so that, and I would ask him, why do we sing every time we come together? And someone said, that gets us moving, that gets us motivated. We don't just come in cold. And it did. It brought us all together. It made us all think of one. It made us all move together. So he was always one who could do that, walk into a crowd and do that.
So I did not get the opportunity to know him, but what I appreciated about him is that he could both inspire, he could organize, but could also do the hard work that it takes to actually do the organizing and the inspiration. When I was the head of the LA County Federation of Labor, I must have only been there for a few months, and I got a call, and they said, Reverend Jesse Jackson is on the phone. I'm like, why is Reverend Jackson calling me? And so I pick up the phone. Yes. He's like, he was raising money for a dinner in LA for Rainbow Push.
Yeah.
And he just said, hey, I need you to do 5,000 for Rainbow Push. And of course I said, of course, yes, you know. But I thought, you know, he doesn't know me, isn't really deeply connected with the organization, but understands this is the part of what you got to do of being an organizer, to have the resources to continue doing the work across the country. And so in those sort of brief moments, and he called me back.
Right.
A couple years later, I appreciated that. That's a real organizer that understands
he was
the
always
two sides of it.
always amazing, always understood what was required of everybody
Yeah.
to do the work, and he never refused to walk precincts, knock on doors,
Right.
talk to people.
Right.
Was always that person who would work hard to turn out whatever we wanted.
Yeah.
And I think people appreciated that in him.
Absolutely.
The best speech, someone asked me, what was the best speech I heard of his? And it really was at the Democratic Convention. And if you haven't heard that speech, you should.
Yeah.
Because it is a talk about his life.
Yeah.
And how he was an orphan and all these kinds of things, because people didn't know that he wasn't raised by this person or that person.
Right.
They thought his life was pretty simple and straightforward, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
It had lots of challenges in it, and he overcome them all. And so it was interesting, because I remember that time the convention was always really, really noisy. And when he spoke, it was the first time the convention was absolutely quiet. And I remember one of the reporters said, "Wow, I have never been on this floor when everybody stopped talking."
That's some power.
It was empowerment. I mean, it was just empowering, how he captivated that audience. And so I remember that, because he was such an amazing person, such an amazing speaker.
Well, loss of a legend, but really a trailblazer who we can follow, and we need some
need a lot.
inspiration and organizing in this moment. That's for sure. Obviously, we've got a federal government and a White House that certainly has the backing of congressional Republicans to try to federalize elections across the country. Obviously, in complete opposition to what's actually in the Constitution of the United States. But I'm curious about your perspective, being on the ground and sort of handling our elections here in California.
Well,
What
it's
does that
interest-
moment sort of mean to you?
It's interesting that people come up with those concepts, and these were concepts that they were totally opposed to.
Yeah.
They never would have been in favor of turning over all the control of elections to the states. The Republicans never, the federal folks never would have gone for that. They believed there was some value in having the states themselves engaged in it. This is a continuation of an effort to destroy what has been built, which is a voting system that embraces all of those who are citizens of the United States. And whether you're rich or poor, whether you live in the woods or wherever, those things are important. And sometimes people think it's only because it's black folks or people of color. But I remember one of my good friends, Toni Atkins, telling me about the fact that her parents never voted until she was in college. And these are white folks in Appalachia who didn't. Because why? Because in order to vote, you had to go to the registrar's office to do it. And they only were open Monday through Friday for a certain number of hours. And so in Virginia, they could not, her parents never had the opportunity to go register to vote. So these things that we've opened up now at a state level, where you can register online, you can register when you get your license, you can register by filling it in and mailing it in. These are things that have opened up the opportunity to every person. And now we're going back to an elitist concept that would restrict people from being able to register to vote, that demand that they have certain documentations that only maybe a few might have. And it's interesting that people are beginning to, I hope, to see that this is really an effort to take away the power of the people, that the wishes of the people should be heard. And that's what the democracy is about.
Yeah.
And so when I see them trying to federalize, it's quite sad. I think people will figure it out. I hope they do. I was with some seniors the other day way out in Sacramento, and I went to a country club. And one of the questions one of the women asked me was, would we have to register in our maiden name? I said, yes. So you'd have to have some documentation. And she was like, I mean, she must have been 80 or 90, okay, who was asking this question, because they are concerned about the fact that voting by mail is so convenient for them. And they have an opportunity to participate, and the large number of us who actually vote by mail now, over 80-some-odd% of all the registered voters actually vote by mail. So this person, who I don't know if she's Democrat or Republican, are beginning to realize that there is some convenience and some for them to have that opportunity at any age to continue to vote. And now you want me to go back and find something in my maiden name, you know, or something of that nature, your birth name. That could be a challenge to any of them. And they may have had birth certificates and don't know where they are after all of these years. Sure. So this is the kind of thing that I hope people see and realize that it doesn't get us any further in terms of being safe and secure with our voting, but it does get us further to being exclusive.
Mm-hmm.
and not open to everyone.
Yeah. This is, the challenges to our election system and the intervention of federal power in many ways is another example of the testing of our federal system in and of itself, in particular as it relates to the engagement of the federal government in enforcing civil rights protections,
Yes.
the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, against the states that have went out of the bounds of what the law is. In many ways, you've seen in places like Minneapolis where that's been turned on its head, where Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice has focused on state actors that have went outside the bounds of the law. And now you have federal actors that are going outside the bounds of the law, resulting in the deaths of citizens. But you have, is the federal government going to enforce the law against federal agents? And so I think it's not just elections, but it's seeped into a whole host of issues, that being one of them, and sort of the engagement and the consent of the governed as it relates to power, police power against citizens.
Well, I think this is something we've not seen before.
Yeah.
And it's shocking to a lot of folks because they never thought they'd ever see it.
Right.
I mean, we've had actions against people of color, where there's, you're overcoming the race issues and all these kinds of things. But to actually have the government organized against its own people and basically violate all of its rules and regulations about how you treat people, and the fact that you have some due process, you have these things that we've always valued. And even in those communities where we've had race riots or incidents that have occurred, the people in the community have often spoken up and said, wait a minute, we believe in law, we believe in what needs to happen. And that's not happening now, and that's kind of shocking that we're not hearing those voices in places where we should be hearing them. And I think it's leaving many of the members and citizens in this nation kind of wondering, where are we? What are we doing? Does this, as we talk about folks fighting in other countries, and then we see what's going on in our own, it's a mirror of the same thing. Yeah. And so it is, what is happening in Minnesota is shocking to many people, but it's happening everywhere. Yeah. And the question is, does our government speak up for us? Do these principles that we've lived our lives by about in terms of acknowledging our freedom and our justice and due process, where is that? Where is that? And those are the things that we have pretty much leaned on and relied on, that even when things get bad, due process will work, that the laws will work, the courts will work. They're slowly coming around, but I think we've been shocked by so many decisions that have been made that it has, and those who I think made them were not aware of just how extreme they would become. Right. When you say, well, you can't prosecute the president, and it's like, what? No matter what he does, you can't. And that has just fueled the whole issue of the power of this person against anything else that we've not seen, that not only we've not seen, but people across the country and other countries have not seen in the United States. This kind of arrogance with regards to their right to do anything they want to do. And the respect of former presidents who violated the law themselves graciously stepped down. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Refused to serve because they respected the process so much. Yeah. Yeah. But this person does not at all.
Yeah, you have a president that resigns for fear of being impeached.
Yes.
And we have a president who's twice impeached and convicted 34 times.
And goes nowhere.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's a shocking reality for those who've spent their life fighting for this democracy and what we believe are the principles that we live by.
But I don't know if you know, but I teach a class, American government class at Cal Poly Humboldt. And one of the sections I teach on is civil rights. Mm-hmm. And everybody wants to talk about the 1960s and the civil rights movement. And I think it's worthy of a dissertation and a whole lifetime of study. Yeah. I try to talk about the road up to the 1960s and talk about the unsung heroes. Right. One of those is Charles Hamilton Houston. Mm-hmm. Yes. And really created the legal soldiers to help further the civil rights movement in many, many ways. And the methodical, strategic work of
Yes.
work at Harvard Law School, work at Howard Law School. But one of the things he did out of Harvard Law School was do a study on access to justice in the South. And there were roughly 9 million Black Americans in the South at that point in time. And how many lawyers were there in the South at that point in time? 100.
Right.
And so one lawyer to 90,000 potential clients means no access to justice.
Exactly.
And what I find remarkable is that he took the steps necessary to change that. And it just sort of calls attention to the fact of what one person who is committed to a cause, what they can actually do with others. And I'm curious for you what sort of inspires you in the moment of a lot of darkness, aside from your grandchildren, keep you grounded. What else inspires you and you would share to others that are looking for some hope?
Well, because I was in ethnic studies and women's studies and Chicano studies at San Diego State, I've studied a lot of history and a lot of the folks who may not be the biggies. Charles Hamilton Houston was one of those. He was a biggie, but to many people, they don't know who the heck he is.
Yes.
My husband admired him because of his work and what he did in organizing across the nation with the NAACP and other organizations and the development of law school at Howard. So we're very familiar with that person, but it's amazing how an individual can, if they are committed to bringing change, can actually bring change. And they may not realize it always in their immediate presence, but over time, people will recognize what they have done. Yeah. And I'm a real big fan of Fannie Lou Hamer. I went recently to her, where they have a huge statue of her in New Jersey. And because this was just a humble woman who wanted to register to vote and was denied the opportunity to vote, to register. But she fought every step of the way. She lost use of one of her kidneys because they beat her so badly and threw her in prison because she was trying to register to vote, so she was in jail for a long time. She lost her job, which was as a sharecropper, and they threatened her family, so she had to basically separate herself from her husband and kids. But she kept on pushing this issue that she was going to register to vote and challenge the Democratic Party, because it didn't want to allow those folks in Mississippi and Alabama to be able to register to vote. Yeah. And I often think of her. She didn't initially get the publicity, but when she was at the Democratic Convention, she got lots of publicity because LBJ tried to stop her and he couldn't stop her. He came on television at the same time she was scheduled to speak, to say nothing. And everybody picked up on it, and as a result, when he went off, they aired her whole speech on TV.
Right.
And this was just a humble woman, and that keeps me reminded that it doesn't really take a person with a whole lot of credentials and degrees and eloquent speeches to have the kind of passion that she had to make a difference. It didn't even take her to be a man to do that. She did it as a woman. And she was beat, thrown in prison, just like a man would be at that particular time. And she kept on moving forward. She wasn't intelligent in terms of academic stuff, but she was smart. She had no education at all, hardly. But when she spoke, you could feel her, and you could feel her passion. And I say to people, if you want to do something, decide to do it and do it. Yeah. Don't think that you're going to become famous, because you may not.
Right.
And there may be a few people who will know your name. Rosa Parks wasn't going to be famous, she didn't think, but they knew her name after a period of time.
Sure.
And so many others who were part of the movement. And I tell young folks, read these books. Read all of these folks that you do, because there's so many of them that are still alive, interestingly enough, and who were part of that whole movement and worked hard to make a difference and didn't mind standing in the background at all, so long as they were pushing forward. Yeah. And it's interesting. I had an aunt once who used to say, when we were in the 60s doing the radical stuff, and your parents always saying, you need to cut that stuff out because you could get killed or something. And so, but I had this aunt, and she would say, and I asked her once, and she said, well, I'm too old to walk long and far, and this and that. She said, but if you kids are moving us forward, I can at least sit on the wagon and lift my legs up so I'm not so heavy to pull. And that's what she would always say. So,
Yeah.
she said, in other words, I'm going to do what I can do.
I'm going to find a way.
I'm going to find a way to support your movement forward. And I always remember her saying, I just lift my legs up so it won't be so hard for y'all to pull the wagon. And I thought it was hilarious that she was that, recognized the value of what was taking place.
In a moment in time in which we are so focused on the individual, and so many folks that are looking to get TikTok famous, there is a power in the humility of those who understand that they are a steward of a movement and a part of a movement in a moment.
Yes.
In many ways. I had the opportunity to meet John Lewis. And just, he is one of the biggies, as you said.
Yes.
And just being around him and in his presence was a remarkable moment for me. And yet he would simply say, hey, there's 100 John Lewises out there.
Oh, that was always just, yeah.
But I just happened to be, in the place to get elected. Now, I know he's much more shrewd politician than that, but there was a real humility.
Tremendously, he was very human, very humble in everything he did. We did some things with him in San Diego, got a couple of pictures with him, but just an everyday dude, who, when you read his story of his life and how he got involved, he was a student and he was marching and protesting, didn't ask to be the leader, but was basically doing what he could. And doing oftentimes in the opposition of most folks' parents. Like, you're going to get killed, don't do that,
Right. I loved his story. He'd always say, Dr. King would always call me the boy from Troy. Boy from Troy, that's, that was his deal. So.
Amazing. Up till his death, he was an amazing man sitting on the floor of Congress. Protesting. Yeah.
Well, listen, I know you've got a busy schedule. I really appreciate you spending a little time and chit-chatting with me. Always good to talk to you. We'll see you around the convention.
Definitely.
And we got some work to do, so let's...
Got a lot of work to do, but it's good to do it with you.
And the same.
Take care.
All right.